Welcome back to Moments That Matter. I'm Paul Schatzberger, and I am missing my co-host and Anam Scott Williams, who is off gallivanting around Congaree National Park with his two wonderful daughters. But I am joined today by the musical duo Chatham Rabbits, aka Austin and Sarah McCumbee, for our third conversation together. Chatham Rabbits is a lot of things: new folk, new bluegrass, new roots music, but they're also old friends. And they've been doing this thing on the road and in the studio for almost 7 years now. Is that correct? You guys?
It is hard to believe.
For sure. So we first had them on Moments That Matter 5 years ago, immediately prior to the pandemic. And then again a year later, talking about the very innovative ways that they've had of continuing to perform and stay in touch with fans during the pandemic. Since then, they've toured all over the United States, invited fans to their farm in North Carolina for some delicious food and music, to which I have been invited and taken advantage of, and even had their own show on PBS. So that's a lot of stuff. Okay, so now at the dawn of 2025, they have a brand new album for us to talk about. It's called Be Real With Me, and it was just released February 14th, and it's their fourth album. So welcome back to the podcast, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. I'm surprised we're here 7 years later. I won't take offense to the fact that you were also surprised.
Well, I'm just saying it's a tough business, so
It is.
So I want to get to the new album and the tour, but first I want to rewind back actually to our second conversation, if I could, on Moments That Matter. It was February 2021, and you all were telling us stories about the animals on the farm, and I commented, and I quote, "I can really imagine you guys on HGTV or something." To which Sarah replied, "There is nothing more than I would like to have a reality TV show about our life. If anybody listens to this or sees this and wants to do a pilot show, we're here." So, on behalf of my co host and myself, I would like to say that Moments That Matter was pretty much responsible for getting you on PBS.
Wow, that is so prophetic. I mean, but it's so true though. Yeah. Now my new thing, Paul, is so this is we can manifest this is I really want to be like Savannah Guthrie or Jenna Bush Hager and be on a that's like my next career is like morning
Yeah,
shows.
maybe 10 years from now, after we kind of like hang up the hat on just touring constantly, Sarah can do that. She would be so good at it.
And that's after the Ryman.
Yeah.
The Ryman is the pinnacle. When we hit the Ryman, and Red Rocks is also up there. When we do the
Yeah, for sure. That'd be amazing. But seriously, what was that experience like having your life recorded on TV?
Yeah, well, okay, this is just so funny that you're bringing this up because actually 2 nights ago, was on YouTube trying to see if anyone had posted videos from our tour so far just to like, kind of get a vibe of how it looked from the audience, and I came across the PBS show, so there's 5 episodes, and they're all on YouTube, and I watched an episode, and I was like, it's been a couple years, so I'm removed from it now, and I was able to watch it with fresh eyes and be like, "Wow, this is so soothing and entertaining." It's just, like, very wholesome and peaceful to watch, and I was like, "Wow," I liked watching us, and I was surprised at how nice it was.
Yeah, it's interesting because for us, like, a couple years ago is like an eternity. It's, like, almost hard to even remember doing it, but that is really timely because yeah, I was up in another area of the house, and I just noticed, I was like, "Is that our PBS show?" And Sarah was just, like, watching it
I was
as a
just
viewer.
yeah, I was just watching it like we weren't in it, and it really it struck
Without
me.
Jane.
No, it's not about vanity. It was just about, like I don't know, it was just really cool to see it and be separated enough where I wasn't analyzing what I was wearing or what I was looking like or sounding like.
We've also moved since then, so we live now on Sarah's family's farm, and so it's also nostalgic because that little farm in Siler City, I really feel like is where our career fully took off, like,
Mhm.
in a place where we left, the Sprinter van behind and just doing it as a duo. We hired our first employee and we like started to really make a name for ourselves. So
And on the PBS show, there's like 4 or 5 animals, our former pets that have passed on, so I was like
Oh,
watching Ruby and
there were some
Petunias.
cheers.
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I will also say that, I realize it was nationally broadcast, but it is also very North Carolina, and I do appreciate that,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, we were just talking about the fact that you're on a farm, um, and this one has been in Sarah's family for generations, right?
Mhm.
Since it was native land, it's never changed hands.
Wow, wow, wow. Um, and that's required a fair amount of renovation, as I understand, after you guys moved in. So Scott and I were kind of wondering, how's that going? And have you had any surprises?
Yeah, so we sold the Siler City farm at a time when I think an important side note for this is, and as you know, should I call you Paul or Mr. Schatzberg? I'm here.
Please don't call me Mr. Schatzberg.
Okay, I'm gonna call you Paul.
Don't do
It
it.
just feels weird, my whole life I called you Mr. Schatzberg. Oh, we a big important part of our life is that my dad, Paul McCumbee, as you know, he really taught me a lot of things about business that we've been able to use in making a career out of music. So I think we would be, we'd be lying if we said it doesn't take sometimes more than just totally just relying on music. So I do a lot of things outside of music, investment wise, and things that really help us with our lifestyle. And one of those has been making really smart decisions with our real estate purchases. And Siler City was a really good buy. We were able to buy that farm, renovate that, and sell it at a very ideal time. It was a couple years ago. There was a major spike in the real estate market. And so we sold it and we bought this family farm. When we bought it, the new farm, it's 60 acres just south of Greensboro, and it needed, I mean, it was like a jungle out here. It was uninhabitable, everything.
Totally overgrown.
We took the resources from that sale and basically started going to town immediately. Kind of took a little bit of a regroup phase for Sarah to kind of hunker down and plan for our for Chatham Rabbits work, and I took like 3 months to really restore the farm. And so, yeah, we got to work really quickly, had a great group of contractors. There was plenty of surprises along the way. Um, but ultimately we renovated this tiny house that her dad built on the farm in what, the 90s maybe? Yeah, the 90s, and kind of gutted that. And then while I was doing the renovation work with her dad, a lot of the work ourself in the tiny house, we had a crew outside. I think more than anything, it was the landscaping and just we had to cut down about 100 trees and
Mhm.
make this a home again. And it's really cool. I mean, like Sarah said, it's been in her family, for generations, for almost 300 years. And we've been finding arrowheads all over the place, and I don't know, just really diving into the history of it and kind of letting that re-inspire some of our music, just like you is, and like that whole experience renovating the farm, I think in some way probably made its way onto this new album.
And I'll say too, like there's a house on our property that was built in 1753, and we've done a little bit of work to that, like taking off old/new additions that were added very cheaply in like 1950, 1960, and we've stabilized the house, but we have a very long way to go
We're gonna have to play the Ryman a lot of times.
to fully renovate it, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've only been out there once, but I will say that it's a great venue. Just very welcoming, very warm, and you guys are great. So,
I'm so glad you've been able to come out to the shows. Yeah, so we like redid for listeners. Um there was an old cattle barn in the center of the property, and it was just falling down. It was so bad. And so we were able to salvage what we could and then rebuild the rest, and it's just in big open air like 48 by 48 pavilion, and that's where we've been having concerts. So I think we've had 7 or 8 concerts out there now.
Yeah, I remember when I was working with the contractor, he was like, "I don't even know if we can save it. We're gonna try." and they started working on it. And eventually they got to the point where they had to build it around the lean, excuse me, around the way it was leaning. So it still kind of leans to the right or the left here and
But
there.
it's sound, it's structure.
Very good. And you've also had a summer camp out there.
Yes, that was so much fun.
I
I've
don't know
tried
about fun.
it was very fun for me. It was fun for me.
Um, well, lots of possibilities. But I do want to talk about the album. So Be Real With Me, that was recorded over a 2-year period, as I understand. Um, the studio at Small Pond Farm in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, for anybody who isn't in North Carolina. So I'm interested because you've recorded in different locations, and I feel like that probably has some kind of impact on the music, how it comes out, in the albums. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. We really haven't after our first album, we really haven't recorded in a traditional studio, which has been really fun. So our first album we recorded at a traditional studio that really got us off on the right foot, kind of understanding what it was even like to be in a studio. We were going in after work. I was in a suit and tie a lot during that process. Sarah was coming from being a teacher. And, so that kinda gave us a good foundation, and then the next 2 records we recorded at a lake house in Smith Mountain Lake, where we sort of set up a studio. This record was really a hybrid. It's a home studio, but it's really nice. It's a really nice home studio. It's also built inside of an 1800s log cabin that's been renovated into the studio. So it's a beautiful atmosphere. And our friend Saman Kajinian, who was the producer for the 2 records before Be Real With Me, he's kinda become sort of the engineer in resident there. So it's kinda like his home base now. So he's super familiar with that. We also know the guy who owns it really well. And for him, renting the studio is kind of a side project. He does a lot of his own work there. And so we were able to do something really cool, which is basically over the 2-year period, sort of pop in and record whenever we got the chance. It was almost like recording from the road in a way, like we'd get home, but then we'd just go record when we had the chance and then sort of press the pause button. So the first song we recorded for this record, we recorded almost 2 years ago, Facing 29, which is the first song on the record. And the studio absolutely had its mark on the whole record. I think I've never really thought about this, but the studio was almost sort of being built as a professional studio in real time, sort of as we were recording there. Like there's been major improvements to the studio since 2 years ago too. And so I think it kind of the way the studio sort of developed is very similar to how we were developing. And I think in that way it made its mark. It was kind of growing up as we were growing up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I read a comment that you made, Austin. I think you might have been speaking in tongues at that time. You talked about sampling organic tones and manipulating them into synth pads and percussive elements. The Bible says that if you speak in tongues, you should also interpret. So, can I ask for an interpretation here?
Yeah, so when we were trying to push our sound a little bit more, using things that were not just, organic tones being you set up a microphone on an acoustic instrument and you play that instrument into the microphone and that's what gets recorded, right? That's like kind of the way we've always done it as a quote unquote like roots music, or before even like a lot of people would kind of put us in the bluegrass world, which I think this record would be really difficult to do that. And so we were kind of pushing the elements of that a little bit, and instead of just going to a sampler or like a keyboard or something and just like creating an electronic sound, which we could have done and it still would have worked, we tried to record acoustic things like Sarah's vocals, for example, like her even just saying a word or like singing a note, and then we would put it in the um into like Pro Tools or whatever system we were using at the time. Actually, I think we were using Reaper as the system we were using. So could manipulate that in ways that would make that organic sample sound electronic.
So messing with the pitch,
Yeah.
messing with the like the timbre, or kind of like the almost like the transparency of it, like how thick it is or how thin, and also like if it's like a repeated phrase. Saman's wife Aaliyah, she just plays flute like on the side as a hobby. And so she came in and just played flute into a microphone, and Saman took that and manipulated it and added it to the song Gas Money, and you wouldn't know that it's there unless you're like really
Yeah.
listening. All those layers like add up.
It's one of those things, if you take out one of those layers, you can immediately hear it, which we did. That was one of our kind of test points for like, is this worth having in this song? So like a shaker is another good example, right? Like we'd record a shaker and then we'd add a reverb or kind of do something to manipulate it, bury it deep in the track, and it kind of gives this propulsion, right? But you can't really even hear it. But if you take it away, it's like the floor kind of falls out of the track. So we did a lot of that. It was really fun. Me and Saman co-produced this record. And so we spent a lot of time, just the two of us, up till all hours of the morning trying these things out. It was like playtime in there. And that was that was really fun. And that's something that we've never done until this record.
Yeah, cool. Um, well, that 2-year period, right, of the writing, the recording of the album, saw you pass kind of over a threshold, if I could put it that way. I know that Austin went from 20s to 30s. Sarah, I actually don't know if that's the case with you. Is that
Yeah,
so?
I also did. But I don't know. Austin seems to 30 for him was like a big a quarter life crisis, maybe.
Whoa.
But for me, it just I've been so 30s have been like a gajillion times better than my 20s. So, but yes, I have also crossed that threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's caused a lot of like reflection, and one might even say upheaval, sometimes. So if I would characterize the album in one word, I would call it vulnerable. And you guys use the word vulnerable a lot in the concert that we just had. Can you give a sense of what that journey's been like for you, and how that experience came out in the songs on the album?
Yeah, I think we can both speak to that because we both have been through that. But for me, to be totally transparent, it's been a lot of I mean, this, Paul, but for the listeners out there, the way I was raised was very much, I went to Christian school my whole life. I was really involved in church. I was really involved in a group of people that were really solid, amazing human beings, but also very much like, this is what we believe, this is what we think, this is how our culture handles these things. And then when you become an adult, you have to make up your own mind, right? You have to say, like, this is what I believe. The idea of having kids is coming up more and more in our life at this stage. I think when you turn 30, sort of the one thing that really sticks out to me the most is like, this is the decade when we're most likely to start a family. Like, and the time clock sort of starts going, oh, like, yeah, you can wait till you're 38. I mean, people have kids when they're in their 40s, but like the ideal time is in the next 5 to 6 years, right? And I sort of had always put that on the back burner. And so as that you start to think about that more, you really have to be solid in your own belief system. And whether that ends up being very similar to the way you were raised or not, you have to make those decisions yourself. And I think going through that process and kind of putting a stress test on the way I think about the world and what I see as my own person has resulted in a lot of good a lot of good reflection, but also like a little bit of chaos, because sometimes I'm like, I don't agree with that, or like, and then you have to kind of face the music of like, well, why? And then you have to have your own answers for those things, and that can be difficult, especially being raised in a environment where it was very much like, this is kind of how everybody views this.
Also, just to add to Austin's point about this, I think, and this is true for me too, like we are traveling about 200 days out of the year. We're staying in other people's homes. We meet new people every night. We're seeing all parts of the country. We see all socioeconomic backgrounds, all religions. And like when you start to realize that the world, like there are many ways to be a person, it's just like, oh,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, so I think that kind of self reflection and trying to be your own person is really what this album is about. And then to take it one step further, how that affects your relationship. Sarah and I got married when we were 22 and 23, you know? Like that is so young that we're different people than we were then. And I'm not sure who advised us that it was a good idea to get married when we were that age. But I'm certainly glad we did, obviously. But you know, when you're not just changing your own self, you're changing together and making sure you're able to hold on to your relationship during that time. And so this record is about self-reflection, like the song Did I Really Know Him? It's also about changing as a unit and trying to do that while you're also holding a career playing music and you're entertaining people and kind of going through this whole process of like, am I being real with these fans of ours that we've built? Like, and how much are you okay with your performer, right? Like, they don't need to know everything about you, but authenticity has always been a big thing for us too. So it's kind of like how much to let people in versus like changing yourself, and then also just like how quickly you're trying to change, and sometimes you don't know yet, you know, and like that's a really hard place to be when you're in a relationship with somebody and building life together, to like you don't have a lot of time to just be like, I don't know the answer right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You know, I teach a ethics course, actually at multiple levels, and what I tell everybody is, you know, this is the time to figure things out, like college, right? You know, because you're not under stress, and you can decide who you are and how you want to approach your life. But to do that on the run, like you guys have had to do, that's quite the challenge. So kudos to you guys for hanging in there with the process.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think I was stunted a little bit in that regard because the way I was raised, you know, there wasn't a lot of I don't know. And I think that's a really important thing to tell people when they're in their 20s is like, look, this is what we believe, this is why, but like it's up to you to figure this out, and we have like space for you to do that, and not like, hey, you know, this is the truth and nothing but the truth, and this is what you should believe, because it took me being on my own to ever get to the point where I felt comfortable enough to do that. And that unfortunately happened when I was in my late 20s into my early 30s. It's still happening, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if I've told either one of you, when Susan and I got married, we said, absolutely, we're not having children. And it took us 9 years to kind of reconcile ourselves to that reality, and thank goodness we did, because otherwise we wouldn't have Carl, and we wouldn't have Austin, and we wouldn't have all this relationship, which is so necessary.
Carl's at the gym.
Um, so this may not be a fair question, but I'll try it anyway because actually it's from Scott, so it's his fault. Um, what song or songs were the hardest to process and write and record? Um, because you know, in obviously in the studio, you're doing multiple takes of a song, you know, and I can imagine if if you're being fairly vulnerable, you know, that just kind of, oh my gosh, you know, um, anything come to mind?
I have one.
yeah, go ahead. No, go first.
Well, I think luckily in the studio with all the people we work with, we felt really comfortable. I don't think that in the studio it was necessarily where the difficulty was. I think it was writing the songs and it being between us, right? So like our process is we normally write really separately. We bring a song to each other and we give each other kind of the finishing touch, and kind of that is, and Sarah wrote a lot of the songs for this record. She was the primary writer on this record. For me, it was the song Did I Really Know Him? I wrote that when we were on a songwriting retreat. I wrote it really quickly, and it was the very first time ever, and I tried to take note of this, especially now that I have some distance from it, because this was a while ago, like,
2 years ago.
Was it when I wrote Did I Really Know?
Mhm.
I wrote the song really quickly. I mean, again, like 15 minutes, and I immediately brought it to Sarah in real time, which never happens. I played it for her, and I like just lost it. I started crying and like kind of like, which I never do. I'm not a crier. So that was like, I mean, I played it. I could barely get through it. I put the guitar down and I went away and like kind of sobbed, which was like, wow, I think, it was extremely cathartic for me. And so I would say that was definitely the hardest one for me to write. But then when we got in the studio, again, being just so comfortable with everybody there and doing a lot of this, we didn't do a lot of takes with the band for this record. We built these songs brick by brick, and we built them a lot. Just, me and Saman in the studio, or me, Sarah, and Saman, and then we brought in band members later to kind of help build it. Um, but yeah, that song really sticks out as like just a tough one to deal with, you know?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was probably this song Childhood Friends.
Mm.
Um, because I wrote that about the friend breakup I had when I was in my very early 20s. And I like, I just knew I wanted to write something about that because I think that, like, everybody has had or has a childhood friend. So I knew that that could be, like, a universal theme, but, like, the more I was writing about it, the more, like, personal it became because I started inserting, like, specific things we would drink or specific places we would go as teenagers and stuff like that, and, it just really hit me, very hard when I was writing it, and it took me a while to finish it, but I'm really glad that I did. It's been, like, a big conversation starter between, like, people that hear it and send us messages or talk about it with me at shows and stuff, so I that's, like, the main thing is, like, if our music can, like, spark a conversation, then that's a good thing.
I would say One Little Orange was also really heavy, about Sarah's grandfather.
Yeah, but I feel, like, more at peace about that.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It
that
just
makes
didn't,
sense.
like, make me I mean, it's sad, but it didn't, like, keep me up at night,
Mhm.
I guess.
Yeah, for our listeners, I just attended your album launch in Asheville and got to hear the album live, which was an absolute treat. And general comment I will make about you guys is that you surround yourselves with incredibly talented people, and I think that's so incredibly wise. We just mentioned very briefly about your keyboardist, which is he's nuts on the key.
He really is.
I knew you would love I was so glad when I saw you were there. I was like, "Oh, you're gonna love this guy."
Joe is insanely talented, and his name is Joe McPhail. He is never that was his first time ever playing in Asheville. He had never played in Nashville or Boone, and he is not a touring musician, and I'm like, like,
Yeah,
where have you been?"
you're so lucky to have these guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And that guy who was with me, Ethan, that's his instrument. And he
Oh,
his
cool.
his mouth was just open the entire time, like, "What in the world?" But another very talented fella, was your opener. Yeah, Joseph Terrell, and I have to say that was also, really a delight just to, like, hear the back and forth, with you guys, Sarah, and thinking that you went to a Quakers summer camp together, that's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy, so we got to hear a lot about that tradition, and, um, I, uh, I was particularly struck that we're kind of veering off here, but it's okay. Come back. I was particularly struck with both of you talked about the importance of silence, which I thought was a wonderful tradition, to kind of carry forward. But also, Joseph talked about that thing. And instead of someone saying, "I'll be thinking of you" or "I'll be praying for you," and "I'll hold you in the light." And I was just, oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite expressions ever in my life.
I know.
I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it to everybody.
In Quakerism, we capitalize the L in light. I don't know if he said that or
Okay.
but I that's how I've always, like, known to write it, known to say it, and that sort of thing, and, like, that is like, I never heard the phrase, like, "I'm praying for you." Like, I never heard that
Mhm,
growing up,
mhm.
but I always heard, like, "We're gonna hold you in the light." There's also, like, instead of, like, praying, like, "I'm gonna pray to make a good decision," it was like, "I'm gonna seek discernment,"
Oh,
was another phrase that I heard a lot.
I would love for you this is also I know this is aside for the listeners here, excuse me for a minute. I would love for you to meet Sarah's dad sometime. He's like the epitome of of just a good Quaker man. Like he really is, and there's something about the silence and kind of how wise some of these people are, and you're like, how where are they getting this? And yeah, it's a lot of because they stop, right? Like we're so used to just over like we're talking out loud as we're figuring things out. I do that all the
Yeah,
time.
it cracks me up when I go like, we play at a lot of, not just churches, but, we've actually got an offer right now to play at a synagogue this summer, but, like, we play in a lot of religious settings, and it always cracks me up because it's just not what I'm used to, like, when they're like, "Alright, we're gonna have a moment of silence," and the moment of silence is like, "Okay, we're done," like, now because I'm used to, like, 30 or 40 minutes every Sunday of sitting in silence.
Or just like this is a big one. Like if somebody speaks at the Quaker meeting, after that person is done speaking and sits down, there's like 5 minutes where like nothing else happens when you just think about what that person said, right? And like what a novel idea. Instead of like there's no bulletin where it's like, all right, this prayer is gonna happen, this scripture is gonna be read, and you can't even process it before you're ready to go eat at the buffet, like
yeah.
it's really cool with Quakerism that is I try to integrate that. In fact, at our wedding, sorry, we had 15 minutes of open worship silence at our
Oh,
wedding.
yeah.
And for people from my world, you can imagine like my parents and
They were
Sarah was like
awkward.
my grooms, everyone's sort of looking around like what's about to happen. And me and Sarah are just sitting there on the bench together, like, this is what's happening. We're centering ourselves in this moment right now.
Yeah. And also related to your wedding, I remember the clearness committee.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
That's right, we talked about this one time.
Which was a bit of a surprise to Austin. Yeah.
Yes.
So this was a long way around to ask this question, okay? Because Sarah, I'm going to put you on the spot because you said that you wanted to talk about religion, okay? So,
Okay, I do.
all right. So Austin did, all right,
Yes.
and I'd love for you to just talk about how has this last 2 years been for all of that, all the tribulation and everything else like that.
Yeah, I think, I have been more inspired than ever, like, in the past 2 years to create and to collaborate with other people and to, like, um, write out or sing things, that or even just, like, write in our on our Patreon or our newsletter or whatever, but, like, things that feel vulnerable because I do think that, like, when, and I don't know who said this, but I read it somewhere, like, vulnerability begets vulnerability, and,
Mhm.
like, when you open up, it allows somebody else to, and my my religion is, like, connecting with people and, like, in connection, and being raised Quaker, I believe, like, capital L, light, the light of God is in everyone, and so those like, believing that and also the creative aspect and, like, just feeling, like, inspired and emboldened to, be real has, like, made me feel very whole and very excited the past couple of years, but I would also be lying if I also didn't say that, like, the Christian nationalism movement deeply bothers me, and, like, it is really, like, such a distraction from who he actually was, like, he was, like, a brown, dirty man from, like, Palestine, like
Mhm.
and those are not the people that are really being represented in the, like, American Christianity sense. So,
yeah.
it's kind of like both of those things have been weighing really heavily on me this past year
And
for
the
sure.
political situation we're in, I think, I know that that's huge for Sarah and me, and like just navigating this. It's strange navigating this, this kind of making our religion and our, our belief system our own while all of that's been going on. Because if you think about Trump was elected the first time, kind of what we were still in our 20s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like that happened, and then we got a break from that, and it's happening again, and it's just a little disorienting, the whole thing of like, what is going on right now?
And it just feels like I have a lot of stuff that I need to work out um in regards to, like asylum seekers and children and like foreign aid and things like that that are like um being cut and like people are being restricted, just like all of those things just don't seem very Christian to me personally.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely tell you that I think as we're going to be writing for the next album and just like moving forwards, like these are all subjects that we're going to be thinking about and trying to write about in a way that is like inclusive, because I also believe you can't, well, we kind of feel like this about at our shows, that like we want our shows to be welcoming to everybody. And because we believe you can't influence people unless you're like up close and like get to know them. And everybody is like way less scary when you get closer to them.
Yeah, the world seems like a little bit less safe place lately.
Yes, I
And
totally agree.
it needs art. Like, I think, like, Bob Dylan was so prolific during his time because of all of the turmoil that was happening politically, and everything, and it's like it's our goal is to use this stuff to inspire us to make art that is like
Positive.
positive
Yeah.
and like also challenging,
Yeah.
and like you can go one of two ways. You can hunker down and be like, screw this, like I'm disheartened and I'm gonna let this affect my life in all the wrong ways, or you can use it to be like, we have this platform where thousands of people a year get to hear what we have to say. Let's do something with that.
Yeah. Yeah. The theme at our church this month is kept safe. It comes from Proverbs, those who trust in the Lord are kept safe. And I just feel like this is what's on people's minds. Like it's just a very dangerous world, right now. And of course, my connection to Ukraine, you can
Oh
imagine.
my gosh.
I mean, it's heart wrenching, So, uh, and I was going to say something else about that. Oh yeah. Um, Maybe my favorite song of yours, sorry, I haven't listened to the new album enough to have a favorite song now, of all of them. But my favorite song at this moment is If You See Me Riding By. And your image of Jesus, on the horse so low, and also other like, images that are in that song is just wonderful. I just I don't know. Your writing is exceptional. I
Thank you. That was one of the few songs we really wrote together.
uh-huh.
Happened was during it wasn't during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was during the pandemic,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was.
when we had more time on our hands, and I came up with that one line about Jesus on the horse,
Yeah.
so, and the horse 16 hands high, and Sarah really took that and kinda built the song around it. That was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like that song. I really love playing that song live because it like builds up.
Yes.
And it's really cool because that line about, "Don't you know that Jesus rode," that is in the very beginning of the song and at the very end, so I think it's just cool to, like, make people think about that 2 times.
Yes. Um, yeah, and you might remember that you actually granted permission to Scott and me to use the song
Yes.
Yeah.
in one of our podcasts, and we used the beginning of the song at the beginning and the end of the song at the end.
Oh, nice. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
But back to the new album. Okay. It's a long way around. Anyway, so the singles, correct me if I'm wrong, are Collateral Damage, Childhood Friends, and Gas Money. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Is that fair? Okay.
Oh, and Matador. Matador is
And
was
Matador.
actually the very first one. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Okay. I do want to make just a comment about Gas Money for listeners. That is just to me, it's just very different for you guys. Like the instrumentation and that kind of thing, and it's super up, and it's just I don't know, it's a lot of fun, but I like all of them. So Sarah, you said Collateral Damage is kind of this meditation on what it means to try to do it all, in this day and age and the toll that it takes sometimes. Um, that those are not your typical folk, fusion lyrics, I don't think. And so, and it seems kind of groundbreaking for you guys. Are Can I ask what kind of reception you've had?
Yeah,
Song?
I've had really, really great reception to the song Collateral Damage because of also like how I pose it in a show. Because as Austin already talked about, like we're entering this decade of our life where like if we want to have kids, this is probably the decade that we're gonna do it or try, who knows. But we also are full-time touring musicians. We rely on Obamacare. We do not have maternity leave. Like venues don't have like breastfeeding lactation rooms and like there's just so many like roadblocks. So I talk about that and also just the nature of touring, going state to state, and like women's maternal health care laws just differ so drastically from Tennessee to Virginia. It's like night and day difference. So I've had so much feedback about that song. Actually, just this weekend in Atlanta, I heard 3 different stories. One from a woman who decided not to have children, and she got really choked up talking about it, and she's like, "It was a really hard decision, but, like, I'm so like, we're ultimately so glad that we're not having kids," and she's, like, my age, and her husband was standing right there. The second lady had 6 miscarriages before she was able to conceive her now 2-year-old daughter,
Mhm.
and she was like, I needed emergency obstetrics care, and now I went through all this, and now I have my beautiful daughter." And then the third lady, she came to the show with all 5 of her children, 2 of which are adult children in wheelchairs. And did you see the dad at Eddie's Attic? The dad carried the wheelchairs up the stairs because there's no elevator at this venue.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
she said, like, "Thank you for talking about this very nuanced, complicated decision that is, like, just so deeply personal." So
We talked about that a little bit, Paul, about kind of when I reached out to you. When you're like one of my go-to people from my childhood that I reach out to with like kind of some of these complicated thoughts or questions, about politics and how religion plays into it and all this. And I think one thing that you mentioned and I think is true is just like the women's maternal care and all that that encompasses is more complicated than I think we've necessarily given it credit for.
yeah, and these are just 3 women at our show of
Yeah.
200 people. Like, I mean, the expanse and the spectrum of that is just, like, so crazy if you look at the whole world, but this is just one little tiny ass Chatham Rabbits show. So, anyways, that song has been a really good conversation point, and it's my personal favorite one on the record because it's, like, most like the music I like to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do also want to mention the song that didn't get played actually on February 14th that I just enjoy so much the instrumental.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
Fish Small Pond. Oh man, where did that come from?
Yeah,
That's all Austin.
that was one of the songs that I wrote, and it was the only. So I really wanted to kind of pay homage to the way we used to record things just on this record, and so that one was recorded completely live, and it was take after take after take. We
Mhm.
stayed up really late one night with the whole group there, and I had written most of that instrumental but not all of it, and we kind of finished it together sort of in real time, which was really fun. Like, the kind of the bass breakdown, that wasn't a part of it. I didn't
Mhm.
have the vision for that, and it sort of came to life when we were sitting there playing it. The instrument that may sound somewhere between a guitar and a mandolin, that is an octave mandolin, and our friend Ryan played that, and he kinda came up with that harmony part for that, and so we just sat around late at night time after time playing it, kind of got in a very zen state, and, we captured that moment. It's not perfect. There's if you really listen close, you can hear, like, a little bit you can hear, like, some mic cables swishing around.
There's also, like, a little banjo flub that we ended up just
Yeah,
keeping.
there's you can hear my boot scrape across the wood floor. Like, I know this because 'cause I'm listening for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, it does capture a moment. It's also a really nice intermission for the record. It's like without being totally silent, it's sort of like that open worship time for like, it's a
Yeah.
time for think about what you just heard,
Yeah.
let that music sort of just envelop you and then proceed to the next song.
So you go. Yeah, because I mean, as we're talking about this and the vulnerability of the songs and everything like that, it is a lot to take in,
Mm.
and of course you can always stop it. I mean, obviously, but if you're listening all the way through, it is kind of nice to have just this little respite, of the instrumental. Anyway, I love it. So, uh, the current tour. You're starting in the Southeast, you're going up to DC, New York, New England, Kentucky, back to the Southeast. Um, do you anticipate going out west with this as you have before?
Yeah, we're trying right now we're putting together like our schedule for this summer. And I know we're gonna be in the Midwest this summer, like Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin area. But we oh, and we're going back to California in the fall. But what we're really trying to work on right now is getting our tour together for Colorado.
Mhm.
We do really well out there and we want to try to like schedule it so we can just spend like 2 or 3 weeks and just go all around the
Yeah.
state.
If we didn't live in North Carolina, I think
We
Colorado
love
would be
Colorado.
it would be really fun. And they do just love our music out there. It's
Yeah,
really fun.
that's great. Um, Still looking forward to, by the way, coming back to Greenville, South Carolina.
Yes, we
Just
gotta
want to
make that
mention out,
happen. We gotta make that happen, the new radio room.
Um, okay, and, as we wrap up, what else would you like us to know about the album or about the tour or the I'm sorry, or Chatham Rabbits? I I just wanna say for the listeners, you know, I lived for 7 years in Ukraine, and I listened to Americans over and over and over say, "The Ukraine," and it just
Oh.
was grating on me, and I wanna be careful with Chatham Rabbit. I mean,
That is so funny. Like, we've kind of just, like, given up probably like you had to do with people saying the Ukraine or, like, I hear people all the time say the Walmart. I'm like, "Okay." Um, but yeah, as far as what else about Chatham Rabbits, yeah, the record is out wherever you like to listen to music. Every single streaming platform has it. It's even on YouTube. Um, and you can also buy the vinyl at our website, chathamrabbits.com, or at many different local, independent record stores. You have to check like your local store, but we've got it in a lot of places. And yeah, come see us on tour. We've got all the dates listed on our website, and we are doing it. We're playing shows all year.
Yeah, I would just add, like, if you have the time and space, try to at some point give it a listen top to bottom and just like put on some headphones and listen to the whole thing through and not just our record, but if you like to listen to music, do it with other records. Like there's a reason why things are put in a certain order and it's a really cool experience when you can listen to a whole record top to bottom.
Mhm.
agree completely. Well, it's been a delight, all as always. Thanks so much for your time, and we're signing off on this session of Moments That Matter. Bye bye.
Thank you.